Hi guys, it's Christian, the second half of the band Bibliophile duo, and we're going to be going over my January wrap-up today. In January, I had a lot of extra reading time and I was able to fit in a good chunk of books, so I'm going to go through each one and let you know if I would recommend it, if you should buy, borrow, or skip it. The first book that I read was A Delicious Descent, and this is described as an horror retelling of Dracula. It's also part of the collaboration called Monsters and Mayhem, which is an horror collection which adapted some of the classic horror stories that you all know with an romance twist. This particular book has with sharing, and brief FF between Mina and Lucy. I picked up this book because I read the author's novel Last Courtesan of Olympus back in 2023 and I really enjoyed it, so I figured I'd start going through some of their available titles, and I'm a little on the fence with this book. Although I found it to be interesting, I do feel like there wasn't really a whole lot of horror elements to it. I was also more enthralled with the beginning of the book when Harker first arrives at Dracula's castle and starts to explore his sexuality, but once they go back to England, it started to lose its spark. I saw some reviews say that the story felt rushed, and I think I'd have to agree with that. The portion of the book that took place in Transylvania felt more fleshed out. It had enough time to tell that portion of the story, but then it kind of became a rush of events once Dracula's household reaches English soil. So for this book, I would say borrow it and then take the leap and buy it if it ends up being something that you enjoy. Next, I listened to the audiobook of The King's Men. This is the third book in the All for the Game series, and it was a reread for me. This is honestly one of my favorite series of all time, and at this point, I consider it to be a comfort read. I really want to dedicate a video series to all three books. I want to read them with Bailey because she has not experienced this phenomenal series yet. I'll probably just briefly state that this series is 100% worth the purchase. Since it's the last book, I don't want to spoil any plot points, so I'll just give a summary of like the trilogy in and of itself. The series follows Neil Jostin. He is the newest addition to the Palmetto State University XE team. He's short, he's fast, he's got a ton of potential, and he's also the runaway son of the murderous crime lord known as the Butcher. Signing a contract with the PSU Foxes is the last thing a guy like Neil should do. The team is high profile and he doesn't need a sports cruise broadcasting pictures of his face around the nation, and the truth will get him killed. But Neil's not the only one with secrets on the team. One of his new teammates is actually a friend from his old life, and Neil can't walk away from him a second time. I also read Snowflake and the Snake. People on Book Talk seem to really like mafia romances, and I've dipped my toes in the water and read maybe like one previously, and it was okay. It was nothing to write home about, so I thought I'd pick this one up and give the genre another try. It's described as a dark mafia romance, and in this book, rival mafia princes are forced into an arranged marriage, and they have to survive a threat against their families. Niccolo Moretti appears to have it all as the privileged only child of a New York City mafia family. He has a massive social media following, but in this cutthroat world of smoke and mirrors, appearances can be deceiving. Out and proud, he tries to rebel against his father's tyrannical control by refusing an arranged marriage to the mafia princess of a rival family. In doing so, he inadvertently sets off a chain of events that threatens to topple the precarious hierarchy of power and influence within the city's seedy underbelly. Gianluca is the overlooked problem child and youngest son of Manhattan's oldest and most powerful mafia family. When chaos erupts over the failed arrangement between his sister and the Moretti family's son, Luca seizes the chance to step into the spotlight and make his father proud. So he moves from the sidelines and into the center of one of the most pivotal unifications in the history of the mob. But putting two rival mafia princes together is like trying to mix oil and water, and the tension soon reaches a flashpoint. I was very excited for this book. I stayed up on a work night trying to read as much as humanly possible before I finally had to force myself to go to sleep so I could be somewhat coherent the next day at work. The plot seemed very promising. You have an arranged marriage between two enemies, dysfunctional, very different people with opposing personalities. Nico has a horrible father who is extremely abusive, and he falls into the arms of Luca, who won't let anything hurt his partner. That just seemed so promising. But honestly, a quarter to halfway through the book, I realized that the writing was just becoming so hard for me to personally get through. In my opinion, it wasn't very dark, and I just found the two main characters to be very immature, which made this book less enjoyable. But the spice was great, and I think that this book would be worth borrowing, but I'm not 100% sure about buying it right off the bat. I honestly don't know if I'm going to purchase the rest of this series when it comes out. I'll leave it at that, and I'll have to contemplate whether I want to continue it or not. I also listened to the audiobook for Till Death Do Us Part, and I loved this book so much. I have it pre-ordered for when the US physical copy releases, so yes, I highly recommend buying this one. But I think the audiobook is probably my favorite way to experience this story. It's set in a world of magic and adventure where Logan hung up his axe and settled down with his sunshiny bard husband, Pi. But when Pi disappears, Logan is forced back into the world that he had thought he'd left behind. The kingdom is in turmoil, and Logan must come out of retirement to save it. But first, he has to save his beloved husband from whatever danger he's in. With the help of an old adversary and a ghost from his past, his ex-wife, Logan discovers that Pi has been blackmailed into stealing a powerful artifact capable of creating a large undead army. The fate of the kingdom hangs in the balance as Logan and his team set out to stop the brewing war and put an end to the king's ban on magic. But in doing so, Logan must confront his own hero complex and come face to face with the one man who's ever made him feel worthy of love. This book takes place in a medieval world, and it's more on the light fantasy side, and I really loved the idea of following around a retired hero, and the narrator did such a great job of bringing the characters to life. The accents were perfection, and it was just such a fun experience, so highly recommend this one. I also want to briefly touch base on a few books that I would say are more skips for me. That would be Atone, Curse of Dawn, and Love and Monsters. Atone follows the story of Tal. He's an elite warrior fighting for the kingdom at the side of a powerful general who loved him. When Tal loses his hand in battle, he is cast out from the warrior life that he's known for so long, and he has no choice but to return to his past, which is a place of horror and guilt for him. There is something about the writing style of this book that didn't click for me. The plot was also very apparent to the reader, so you could see exactly where this was going, what the twists were going to be, so it did feel very boring the further I got into it. So overall, I think this book would be a skip. Curse of Dawn presented a very interesting concept, but I don't think I really fell in love with the execution. For the past 2 years, a virus named Dawn rises every day at first light to kill any human it touches, turning them into ravenous zombies. There's no cure, most of the living humans are gone now, so that leaves only the Fae, vampires, shifters, and some other paranormal / magical beings who are not affected by it. Our main character, Orion, is a Fae who was trapped on Earth because he was on vacation when Dawn broke out across the planet. He eventually meets Miko Reyes, an alpha werewolf, and his pack. And they try to survive together and kind of also fall in love in the process. I think a zombie apocalypse from the perspective of the magical and paranormal communities is a super cool and unique idea. However, it didn't feel like an adult novel to me. There was just a lot of immature and cheesy dialogue, so it was kind of difficult to get through. I would give this one a skip personally, but maybe if you're just starting to dip your toes into maybe shifter romance, maybe give it a try. Love and Monsters was another audiobook that I didn't end up liking. The book follows Noah Barnes and Jake Perez. These two friends and co-workers end up entering into a relationship, but once Noah receives a bloody package on his doorstep, we start to enter a stalker mystery crime situation. Overall, I kept putting this audiobook down and coming back to it because of a couple things. First and foremost, I didn't find the narration to be that exciting. It was hard for me to remember who was who, differentiate between the two main characters. Additionally, this book is more of like a mystery crime stalker book. The twist felt very obvious, and the mystery wasn't much of a mystery. I read many mystery crime books at this point, and this one didn't really add anything new to the mix, so that was another reason why it didn't live up to my expectations. I also think I went into this book with the improper assumption of my dumbass looking at the title Love and Monsters and the cover where it's two guys sitting on a cliff in the wilderness, and my mind went to, it's a secret shifter romance. But no, monster within the title refers to just the very human kind of monsters. Overall, this book for me would be classified as a skip, unless maybe you're starting to dip your toes into romance novels with more of like a mystery thriller element to it, or if you don't really mind the more formulaic mystery thriller crime novels, then I would go ahead and try it. I also read Leather and Lace, which is kind of a Sam and Dean supernatural vibe. The story follows Dorian. He's an unlucky vampire from the slums of Devil's Row, and he makes ends meet for himself and his emotional support chihuahua by working sleazy bars, just doing what it takes for them to get by. Cash is a monster hunter. Hunting does not leave time for friends, let alone love, when their paths cross during a bloody run-in with the vampire vampire mob, Cash upends Dorian's life, and he takes Dorian under his wing to teach him how to hunt monsters. The unlikely pair become partners, and then best friends, and then their bond starts to deepen and grow, and becomes complicated when Dorian falls in love with Cash. I thought the concept was interesting, but I feel like there could have been more. There's so much you can do with a vampire-human duo who go around hunting down supernatural baddies. However, I feel like the story just kind of fell short of my expectations. It's missing something that I can't quite put my finger on. Maybe borrow this book before committing to buying it. I thought this was supposed to become a series eventually, and I think it would do well as a series because I just feel like there was more to their relationship that could be explored. But I'm not 100% sure if I will continue to buy the series or not. I've got to think on it. Now, I also listened to the audiobook Malum Discordiae. It's a dark paranormal MM romance about witches, necromancers, and a blood feud that has lasted centuries. The story follows our two main characters, Cassius Corbin, who is a necromancer, and Graham Hewitt, who is a weather witch. Corbin has finally returned to his hometown Winslow, and he's stayed away for roughly 6 years due to his mother's murder by fellow witches. Hewitt, the son of his family's arch enemy, enters the picture, and an enemies to lovers story unfolds. Overall, I enjoyed the narration. It felt very immersive, so I think this one is worth buying. And I already added this to my physical books to purchase because I want a paperback to sit on my shelves. Now, 2 more books that I want to talk about are Role Model and Glitterland. Role Model is an audiobook that I've read previously, and it was one of the first sports romance books that I was introduced to, and I think it still holds up. I loved it. This story follows Troy Barrett, who has been freshly traded to Ottawa after calling out Dallas Kent during a team practice for SA. He wants to do better as a person, and he thinks the Ottawa team might be his place, an opportunity to better himself. Fortunately, the Ottawa team includes a fun cast of characters, including a social media manager, Harris Drover. Harris is the opposite of Troy in every way. He's friendly, cheerful, chatty. He is definitely not the sort of person that Troy would normally associate with, and yet a romance ensues. I love this book. The narrator did a fantastic job, and I think it's an automatic buy. My only gripe is there is no physical copy of this book in existence to my knowledge. You can only read it digitally or through an audiobook. So one day, I hope I can have a physical copy to put on my shelves. Last but not least, I read Glitterland. Once the golden boy of the English literary scene and now a clinically depressed writer of pulp crime fiction, Ash Winters has given up on hope, happiness, and most of all himself. He lives his life between the cycles of his illness, haunted by the ghosts of other people's expectations. Then a chance encounter throws him into the path of Essex-born Darian. Flashy and loud, radiant and full of life, Darian couldn't be more different, and yet he makes Ash laugh. But Ash has been living in his own shadow for so long that he can no longer see a way out. Can a man who doesn't trust himself ever trust in happiness? I actually bought the physical copy of this book but ended up listening to the audiobook, and I'm so glad I did. The narration is phenomenal, and I think the accents and performance really tie it all together. The narrator really knew how to do his job well. I felt like I was one with the characters and just completely immersed in their world. I 100% say buy this book because I think this is going to be a book that I revisit again and again. It was an emotional roller coaster, and I loved it so much. Those are all the books that I read, and I hope you found something that you enjoyed and will hopefully be able to read. See you next time.